No, I can get that. All right. Okay. I had this powered on. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 7th meeting of the Scio Township Planning Commission. Roll call, please.
Riser.
Present.
Hyde. Present. Ball. Present. Yeaple.
Present.
Moore.
Present.
Culbertson.
Present.
Rodney is absent.
All right. Quorum. Adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes or revisions to the published agenda?
I move adoption.
I support that.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Moving on to communications and correspondence. We did have one email from Rob Pattinson that was included in the upload for the community church daycare. Any other reported communications? All right, I also emailed a PCECF report that'll get uploaded tomorrow. Right. We have no presentations, so we're moving on to public comment. Oh, you had a question.
I did look to see where the adoption of the previous draft minutes.
The minutes, oh, we have to add the minutes to the, that's
I'm
usually.
sorry.
7?
Oh, it's number 7.
7. Yeah, it's after the public comment.
I'm sorry, go on. Okay,
There it is. It is.
Okay.
7.
all right, so I'm gonna open public comment at 7:02. People wishing to address the planning commission on matters which are not, we don't have a public hearing, so on any matter on the agenda or otherwise, such oral presentation shall be limited to 3 minutes, except for a representative or spokesperson of an organization shall have 5 minutes to address the commission. We'll start with anyone that is in Township Hall. If you'd like to address the planning commission, please come forward. Seeing no one, we'll turn to our public online.
Yes. Rob Pattinson.
All right, hi, Bob. Rob.
Hi, everyone. Rob Pattinson, Scio Township resident. First of all, I want to congratulate the Planning Commission and the ESTF subcommittee on the sustainability fair this weekend. I was there for about an hour and a half in the late afternoon, and it looked very busy with lots of conversations going on, and I thought it was very successful. I think there was about a dozen electric vehicles there, which was very cool. I did have one very funny conversation with one of the EV guys. He had the new Reven, and his was a couple of years old, and he was bummed because the new Revens have 1,000 horsepower, and he only had 835 horsepower. And I just about coughed up a lung when he's telling me he's only got 835 horsepower in his EV. Jan, the banner, is in the basement with a hardware kit and instructions for putting it together, so it is ready for next year. Christy knows where the shelf is, so ESTF does indeed have a shelf in the basement. You guys last week about the 242 church, and I'd like to hear more tonight about the test sensitivity for the tests they did. If, for instance, in the dioxane, if they're only testing to 300 parts per million, where our water testing is down to, half a part per billion, then what sort of testing sensitivities did the different tests have? And also, I saw in the agenda packet, Laura, thank you for the email from Trenton about the metals. I did ask you guys about the lead, arsenic, barium, chromium, and zinc. And the testing guy said that they were below the standards. I'd like to hear some more about any of that information. And then also chemicals that were found were the benzo B, fluoranthane, benzo K fluoranthane, fluoranthane by itself, and pyrene. And I'd like to hear more about any dangers with those levels, and again about the dioxane. And also note that there were 7 samples taken and 3 samples were tested and 4 samples were held and not tested. And I'd like a rationale for why all the tests weren't performed on all the samples. Thank you. Well done, gang. See you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
No.
I'll entertain a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Support?
Moved and supported. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and closing public comment at 7:06. Okay, next we move on to the approval of the minutes of our last meeting.
I would move their approval. Support.
Did you have a highlighted? No. All right, we have a motion to approve and support. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes as drafted? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved as posted. Right. We have no public hearings. We have 2 items of unfinished business, and the first is conditional use number 24004, PSP number 24008, the 242 Community Church Daycare. And I also want to point out this evening, we have Carlisle Workman, Doug Lawan is joining us, as Laura had another commitment, since this is the first Monday instead of the second. So, all right. So, yes, if you all would introduce yourselves again and
Absolutely.
kind of update us.
Thank you
Since
very
our last meeting.
Hey, thank you for having us over again. Appreciate the opportunity to come before the commission. My name is Albo Esilapa. I'm the campus pastor. I'm in charge of the local location for 242 Community Church. That's on the property in question here. And I'm accompanied by Eric Rao, who is our executive pastor. And he was overseeing a lot of the business side of things as well in the past and has been involved in the building of this facility up until now. So we're happy to be here and to be able to just go over some of the things we mentioned. Thank you, Rob, for your comments on there. And we're trying to see our best what we can answer for today. I think the things that were important for this day was the 4 things: the South Township Planning Commission, the review and approval of the proposed condition as required by the township, and actually the whole list, you have it all on there on page 21. The whole list of the items on there, I know has been presented. So I don't believe we need to go hatch over it anything more unless there's additional questions that you all may want us to dig into a little deeper.
I do have one piece of clarification from Tom's comment. It was the last comment that mentioned that there was 7 tests. Rob, I'm
yeah.
sorry, yes. He had mentioned there were 7 tests and only 3 were presented. I assume he's looking at the report section to get that number 7, but as I look at it, there's only 3 soil borings. For some reason, there's, and this is computer page 37 of 37 on the PDF of the new soil testings that we provided. But there's only 3 soil borings that were conducted. So boring 20, 21, and 22. They're mentioning different depths there, so it created 7 items. I'm not sure why they cataloged it that way, but just a clarification that to my knowledge, PM Environmental did only 3 soil borings, and then that's what is the information provided to you. Also in the conclusions of the document, you saw that all those borings are consistent with the previous 19 that were completed back in 2016. And there's nothing new or surprising from that information, so.
Shall we go to Carlisle Workman just for their updated, and then we can, is that okay? Okay. All right, Doug.
Doug Lawan,
Yes, sorry.
All right, Doug. Hi, Doug.
Uh, Yeah, so our memo dated September 30th. Talks about the conditions that were made by the planning commission back in June 10th. And those were, just to remind everybody, that was to submit and review of the current soil testing report, as well as any other original tests that were done, specifically for dioxane and other contaminants. The second item was submission and review of the restrictive deed agreement, also referred to as the restricted covenant and or deed restriction. And the third item that the planning commission made as a condition when you postpone this action was an assessment and review of the current and proposed REUs, so residential equivalent units, to determine if additional REUs are needed. So since June, the applicant has provided the original soil testing report, which I believe was from 2017, 2016, 2017. The current soil testing report, which was conducted in August of 2024. They did provide the master deed and bylaws for the Filter Farm site condo association, master deed and bylaws, as well as the restrictive covenant, which was separate from the master deed and bylaws. And then OHM did provide a memorandum regarding the REUs. So all the additional information that was requested by the planning commission has been provided. And I'm certainly no soils testing expert, but from what I could glean from that information, and speaking to Laura about this, because she has been in contact with some of the players here, it would appear that the soils on site, based on this information and a recent email from the applicant's geologist, is that the soils on site appear to be, for lack of a better term, normal and or not above what would typically be found in other soils. The applicant can correct me if I'm guessing, probably overgeneralizing, but that's what we could find and what we were told currently from their geologist. I took a look at the master deed and bylaws and the restrictive covenant. And the restrictive covenant, as you probably were all able to see, specifically permits childcare centers at this site. So it prohibits single-family homes, but then it goes on to say one of the uses that they specifically would permit in that restrictive covenant was a childcare center. So the use based on those restrictive covenants is not an issue. And I would note that Scio Township, we don't regulate individual, restrictive covenants. That's not something that we typically regulate, but it is there, and now it's showing that is a use that's permitted. And then I don't want to speak for OHM, but there's a pretty simple memo that even I can understand when it comes to engineers, and that memo indicates that they are not recommending any additional REUs are needed for this site. So at this point, we believe they have provided the information that was requested, and I will try to answer any questions that Planning Commission has moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much. And is there anything that OHM wants to add?
No, I don't have anything to add. Just like Doug mentioned, the church has 5 existing REUs and the daycare would require 5. But since the church use is on the weekend and the daycare use is during the week, that's where the rationale is coming from of not needing to require any additional.
Okay, thank you. No questions?
So on page 3 of the updated report from OPM, it goes into the soil analytical results. It talks about VOCs, PNAs, PCBs, and metals. And two of the PNAs and the metals, there's some concentrations. Found in the testing. But the one thing I wanted to ask you is that, so the way the phraseology is, I'll just take the first one, the PNAs. It says concentrations of several PNAs were detected in the soil, in the soil samples exceeding the laboratory MDLs. But it did not exceed the most restricted Part 201 residential cleanup criteria. And as I understand it, MDLs stand for method. I can't even remember. Yeah.
Method detection limit.
Yeah, method detection limit. So there's two ways or two standards, I guess, is what they're bouncing off of. And one is the MDAs versus the Part 201 residential cleanup criteria. So I guess for me, in both of those concentrations with regard to PNAs as well as the metals, I'm still left with the question of what's acceptable. So in other words, it isn't acceptable under the MDLs, but it's acceptable under the Part 201 residential cleanup criteria. And I guess my question would be, how do you square that? And if you don't understand my question, I'll try to be clear.
No, I do understand the question. But, you know, we're certainly not geologists and, we know we didn't invite, our geologist here tonight. Maybe we should have, but,
Well, this was something we wanted. We wanted a recent testing, so I'm surprised you didn't have them come. Okay, I get it. And then, I can hardly read, oh, and in response to your comment about the bores, the reason I got is this document here,
yeah,
chain of custody record, it's in your packet. And it refers to 1 through 7 samples.
yeah.
Maybe I'm reading that wrong.
Yeah, if you look here, it says soil boring 20, soil boring 20, and then it gives depths 0 to 1 feet, 3 to 4 feet. So
Okay,
that is the same
same
bore.
bore, okay.
The same here, soil boring 21, 21, and then 21, and then 22. Why they wrote it like that, I'm not sure.
Okay,
But as I review it, I know that there's only 3 soil borings out there.
okay, thank you for
Visually,
that
I know that.
clarification. So, I just have one other question. I can hardly read this chart, it's so small. I'm gonna bring it up on my screen. So I'm looking at the chart that is sort of horizontal across, and it has each of the metals or the VOCs and the PNAs and it's table 1. You know, what I'm trying to understand here is when I look at this chart, it's hard for me to understand what's acceptable under the MDLs and or what's acceptable under Part 201 of the residential criteria. So what I see here are levels, okay? But what I don't have a sense of as I read this chart, and perhaps I'm missing something because this is all new to me, that you could point out, what are the acceptable levels versus what's here based on those two standards, we'll call them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair question, and frankly, I don't think I'm educated enough to
Fair
give
enough.
you a good question.
I
Good answer
appreciate
to
that, I understand.
Look at page 35 out of curiosity, because page 35 has M's next to things. Where was the? At the detection levels, yeah, there's this flags column. And it says result report MDL, not RDL. I'm assuming it's on more pages in this area.
Is that in the appendix?
That's page 35. Almost all the way down.
Oh, the updated one.
Well.
I guess I have a question for you guys. It's gonna sort of
I don't
go,
have a Page 35. I don't
it'll
know.
go along the same level. I did see that, I guess we'll call it the log page, the very last 37 out of 37 page. Is there a reason, and it's okay if you guys don't know it, I totally understand that. Is there a reason that they chose to only test out of all those soil borings out of the 2021 and 22? They only tested the 0 to 1 foot borings and they didn't test any of the deeper borings, out of curiosity, or do it mix?
Yeah, to my understanding, earlier on in the report, you'll see that all soil borings were done to a depth of 16 feet.
Okay.
What this is representing is a field test of or field report of some sort. I'm not sure what they're referring to when they say 0 to 1 feet and 3 to 4 feet. That means it's a new bore that kind of comes up or whatever. I'm only speculating there. But I do know earlier in the report, it shows 16-foot depths for those soil borings.
And you're saying page 35 under the packet?
This is out of the attachment that's labeled 14 OPM site investigation.pdf. I didn't look at
What was
the
that page 17?
whole,
Is it called analytical laboratory report?
Yeah.
yeah, it is.
It's right toward the end of this. The
So I see the
Yeah, there you
MDL,
go.
but there's nothing under there.
There's one. These are Ps and there's an appendix that. They said that's integrated as one P.
Okay,
I'm not a scientist, I'm just reading what the table and the data shows. you know?
okay. Well, we're assuming that's what it's showing. Okay, all right. Those were my questions. Thank you, Sue.
Other questions? It looks like from the, the log that they held the deeper soil borings and they tested the 0 to 1 foot. And my assumption is that, in a playground, the contact is gonna be, or the disruption and so forth would be in that first foot. That's my thinking, but don't know if. And while they're doing the borings, they might as well take the other samples in case there was a need to.
That's exactly what they did. So you can see further up in the document on page 15 of that same report, it actually has sample interval where it picks up a little bit, mostly topsoil, a little bit of, well, at least on 21, SW medium to loose sand dam.
And everyone did get the communication about the metals being typical of the background.
Yes. Is that the October 4th from engineer Trenton Singer?
Yeah. And so those are the things that are above above detection. What's that?
But below the levels that are.
That would, yeah. So I think if you look at the email that Trenton sent about the metals, it sort of defines what that 201 criteria is. that, so that level would be, that contact over a period of time would not be harmful.
So that's what the memo says.
What?
Yeah, that's what the memo says. So that's not, yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to square this letter from Mr. Roush. Eric, that's you?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the previous site investigations, in that paragraph on the first page, you say no concentrations of target analytes were detected above the laboratory method detection limits, but that's not true. There were detections above MDLs, but they were not above the Part 201 analysis or standard. So that's one thing. I mean, you may disagree, but do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess to be clear, though, I did not write that. That was addressed to me,
Okay.
but I am not
fair
the
enough.
author of that. That is from PM Environmental and from our geologist, so.
Okay, well, they're they're contradictory to their own report. But anyway, however, previous monitoring of wells identified concentrations of 1,4-dioxane that exceeded the Part 201 cleanup criteria.
So you're referring to the original testing,
2016.
the old testing.
That last statement in this OMP summary says that. It mentions that however, previous monitoring of well data on the subject property identified concentrations of 1,4 dioxane that exceeded the Part 201 cleanup criteria.
So I can offer clarity to that if you'd like. So that's representing previous site investigations. On our site, along with the entire filter farms facilities, are monitoring wells that are annually monitored. I believe what that's referring to is the monitoring wells. And as you go to depths that are more subsurface than 16 feet, that's where you start getting into those soil contaminations, which I know everyone's familiar with.
Yeah, and there were, if you looked at the overall soils, there were areas that had the contamination. And one of the reasons why we wanted to have, but it wasn't uniform over the site at all. And one of the reasons why we wanted to have these done was there wasn't any testing in the exact location of the playground. And so this was to.
Plus, it wasn't recent.
Correct.
So I don't have any other questions, but I would say I'm concerned about page 3 of this summary that I talked about before. Concentrations of several PMAs were detected exceeding the laboratory MDLs, but did not exceed the most restricted part of 201 residential cleanup criteria. And that's consistent with the last paragraph in that subsection. Concentrations of several metals were detected. They exceeded MDLs, but they did not exceed the standard of the Part 201 residential cleanup criteria. So my question, I'm left with, and part of this is ignorance on my part, I will admit that, is like, well, what does that mean in terms of safety? Which is what this is all about, okay? And, because there's two standards, one standard is not met and another standard is met. And I don't know how to discern that information.
So as I've read through this document and when I talked to the geologist going back to late August, here's how I understood it. So it says under Part 201, a background concentration of a hazardous substance that exists in the environment at or regionally proximate to a facility that is not attributable to any release of that facility.
You're reading from the report?
I am, yeah.
What page?
Starting, it's on report page 2, but computer page 3. So analytical results. what I'm reading when I hear about this part 201 is an acknowledgement that this facility is within a proximity to a known concentration. And that is what that is referring to. So when it's talking about under part 201, I believe that's what part 201 is, from my recollection from going to my research in 2016 and 17, is on that side of things. So they're in their analytical results, they are mentioning an acknowledgement of the history of this site. And so that's how I interpret that paragraph. Again, I didn't write it, but as I read it and talked to it, that's how I interpreted that.
Okay, I have a clarification. MDL or method detection limit is the lowest concentration of a substance that can be reliably detected in a given method. So all we're talking about in an MDL is it's above the minimum that it can detect. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong. It just means they can detect it with that method.
So the samples are the samples from August 12th.
Correct.
These current samples, not, I thought I heard you say something that these are prior samples, but these are current samples, SB 20, SB 21.
Yeah, as I read page 2, that last paragraph says under part 201, a background concentration of hazardous substances that exists in the environment regionally. So what I interpret from that is an acknowledgement of the contamination that we're aware of fully on that site. And so that's how I interpret that paragraph, is that is referring to acknowledgement of that contamination.
So taking that in what they're saying is they did detect it, and then the standard is the 201. And the 201 says that concentrations of these things below this over, if you have contact with them over time, that they're not harmful. Or however that standard is. And so that's why they don't also require them for, so if it was a single family home residential, they would not require remediation of those soils.
That's for somebody that's living there,
Correct.
playing in it all the time, possibly.
Possible.
Whereas this is not home in a single family.
Yeah,
So it's
and
even-
what I ultimately saw on report page 3 at the very bottom is this is signed by both the staff geologist and the principal of the company and another manager. That says the dermal contact pathway has been adequately assessed. No further evaluation is recommended at this time. These people have, there's an eviction insurance, and if they make a mistake, that will lie for a lot of money. So they're scientists. I kind of understand their opinion. Understand we don't necessarily like it, or disagree with it or something, but at least from their scientific opinion, this is an area where people can be in contact with this soil and they're not going.
If you don't mind, may I speak?
Sure.
Yeah. On page 3 of that same report, under summary and conclusions, second to last paragraph there, it says no target analytics were detected in the soil samples analyzed in August of 2024 at concentrations exceeding the laboratory MDLs, the most restrictive part 201 residential cleanup criteria and or screening levels. So what I interpret from that is that for those 3 criteria, all of the analytics from those 3 soil borings show that it is below those screening levels.
And that's how I take
But
it.
that's not what it says above. I hear what you're saying. I see it. I see what it says. It says there were no target analytes were detected in the soil samples, but under soil analytic results, they were detected. PNAs and metals that did not meet the MDLs.
So MDL is minimum level that they can be detected.
No, it stands for method. It stands for minimum.
Well, it's
The report
method-
has it
the
defined.
method's limit of detection. And it was above that, meaning they could detect it. And then the levels that they detected were below the criteria for cleanup. Did I misspeak?
It's my understanding.
So, can I ask? If this passes tonight, if the planning commission, you really should have your engineer on Zoom or there, because this is gonna go to the full board. So the full board's gonna have,
Protection limit.
be asking these same questions just as pointedly. So, you know, if this passes, you're not out of the woods yet. So I'm disappointed that your engineer isn't here in person or via Zoom to answer questions that pastors shouldn't have to answer about soil contamination.
Yeah, I fully understand and take full responsibility for that. In reading the summary conclusions and.
That's not good enough. We, see, here's what we have to do. We have to
Before you
find.
speak, I was just going to say that NDL stands for method detection limits,
Right. It's the limit.
not minimum, blah, blah, blah.
No, but method, MDL means the lowest concentration of a substance that
Yeah,
can
that's
be
right, that's
reliably
right.
detected.
Like whatever.
Well, it doesn't say that, but I hear you.
That's what the definition of an MDL is.
So we're gonna have to make. a
We're happy to
finding.
have our geologist.
We're
here.
gonna have to make a finding that the proposed use, I mean, this is where it comes down to for me, is a letter D. That the proposed use will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to the existing or future neighboring uses, persons, property, or the public welfare. So are these kids gonna be safe playing in that dirt? That's what it comes down to. You want that too, obviously, but, you know, no disrespect to you folks, but, you know, there are some technical questions being posed that you really aren't in a position to answer potentially to this body's satisfaction. So if it gets passed today, based on a reading and an assumption on this, I would heartily recommend that you have your engineer in person or via Zoom, probably in person better, to answer the questions that are gonna come from the full board if this passes tonight.
You have our commitment to that.
Did you get the answers that you needed?
I think yeah, as best as Eric could respond to it, and I think I understood his interpretation of the summary too. I'm fine. I will say that I'm gonna vote no, not because I'm against daycare. I'm very much against for daycare, and I'm very much appreciative of the 242 church. I've had clients that have been able to visit their parents in foster care at your church, so you provide a lot of resources to the community. But I don't feel comfortable with the report. And I've heard everybody's interpretation, but I feel like, this was like the number one thing we were concerned about. And for that reason, I'm not gonna vote for it today. But I'm only one person, so. It sounds like everybody else has got their interpretations too, so it'll probably likely pass.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering, you know, John, I think, I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with reading soils reports, and I do understand the MDL as it is the minimum concentration of a substance that can be measured, okay, with a high level of confidence, right? So I am satisfied with the conclusion of the report that there aren't any you know, being in contact with those soils would not be harmful. I think it would be good, and I think a condition of, I would want a condition that the soils engineer be present to answer the specific questions regarding the report. And I think the other thing would be, oftentimes these tests are, is this for children? Is this for adults? Is there, you know, a difference in, you know, where they see, you know, absorption and so forth? I mean, that's what they're talking about, contact, and maybe, you know, ingestion is different than, you know, the contact. There may not be a difference between children and adults, but I think it would be beneficial to have those, have questions answered, because I know you know, you want to get started And I think if we I would be in favor of saying yes, if there were some specific conditions about that person being available, at the Board of Trustees.
I guess I will take John's. I think if the person isn't there, it's not gonna pass. I don't know that we need to make a condition. I just don't see it going forward without it.
Well, that would remind them that it has to,
Yeah.
that it needs to happen. I don't know.
Yeah, that,
Uh-huh.
I think that they really should have, I don't know if it's Antonowitz or if it's, the other guy whose name I referenced, Trent Zinger.
I would just say a representative, a knowledgeable representative from the soils testing company.
Sometimes that gets knowledgeable. Who's the knowledge? Is it the CEO or is it the PE or is it the geologist who's, you know what I mean, that, so. Qualified personnel representative.
To interpret the
The
findings.
Yeah, and to answer questions about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we could table this, or we could, I think it's okay, I'm in favor of passing this on. But at the board, it's gonna be a inquisition isn't the right word, but there's gonna be hard questions asked about the Gelman plume and the soil. So.
And this gentleman sits on that board too.
And depending on when you come to it, I might be on that board at that point.
Is there, anyone other, any?
They've answered the questions I had as to why.
And then
All
we-
the
we
soils
do have,
And model.
model motion. Who would like to, Brian, do you want to?
I'll give it a
Take that,
shot.
okay.
Okay. So based upon the information received from the applicant and reflected in minutes of this meeting and the public hearing held on June 10th, 2024, the planning commission finds the conditional use and related information received by the township meets the required standards and findings for conditional land use and recommends approval. Specifically, has found the following required standards and findings found in section 36-224 of the zoning ordinance have been demonstrated by the applicant. A, will be harmonious and in accordance with the objectives and regulations of this ordinance. B, will be compatible with the natural environment and existing and future land uses in the vicinity. C, that the proposed use will be served adequately by essential public facilities and services such as highways, streets, police, and fire protection, drainage ways, refuse disposal, or that the persons or agencies responsible for the establishment of the proposed use shall be able to provide adequately any such service. D, that the proposed use will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to the existing or future neighboring uses, persons, property, or the public welfare. E, that the proposed use will not create additional requirements at public cost for public facilities and services that will be detrimental to the economic welfare of the community. F, that F will be compatible with township's adopted general development plan. Further, the planning commission recommends the following conditions be placed on the subject conditional use. One, to provide the state license information to the township once issued.
I have another one at some point when you're done.
I was gonna guess two would be to have a,
These conditions.
I have a proposed condition, but I'd wait till it's my turn, right?
What were your conditions again?
so number one would be provide state license information to the township once issued. And I would say two, and if someone has an amendment to this, let me know.
I'm thinking about that the applicant produced technical staff from PM Environmental at the BOT meeting to answer inquiries related to the site character assessment and findings therein.
I like that. I will take that.
I'll. Yeah, go on.
Anyone want to second that? Or add any more
Is there
conditions?
support?
I'll support.
Further discussion? A roll call vote.
Walsh, yes. Moore,
No.
Gable,
Yes.
Hyde,
Yes.
Riser,
Yes.
Culbertson,
Yes.
Motion carries 5-1.
Thank you.
Just so you know, guys, it's that you produce technical staff from PM Environmental at the BOT meeting to answer inquiries related to the site characterization assessment and findings therein.
Thank you.
Okay, whether it's Antonowitz PE or whether it's the other individual, a geologist that's or both, whatever.
They'll be there.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
of course it will. Yeah.
All right, moving on to conditional use number 24007, the Maxi Cosmetics new cell tower.
I think the only thing we really wanted to do, because there's already a review that's been done by CW with regard to this, Carlisle Warman, with regard to this and the additional information we provided at the last meeting, is to go through the several things that they mentioned at the end of their letter, at the end of their on which they asked for a few other things from us. So I'm just gonna go into those. I've provided some of this in something that I dropped off on Friday in connection with this, but all of this has been provided in one form or another, either us testifying to it or in previous application materials that we provided. So I'm gonna go through each of these things and then obviously we'll just take any questions you may have with regard to going forward. First thing was the compliance with federal and state standards relative to the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions. Our radio frequency engineer in his report states that our emission levels are below FCC maximum permitted standards. And that was in the original submittal letters that was provided in connection with this. The FCC has also approved this site under those cases. And we also have a FCC permit that is in fact presented to us, a license actually, rather than a permit, a license for broadcasting. And it specifically provides the levels that we can do so, and it's all approved through the FCC. Those materials, like I said, have been provided in previous circumstances as well. Next item. Note to the site plan regarding 3 additional wireless providers. I think there may have been a little disconnect last time we were here. We had said there was 3 parties on the tower. That didn't mean 3 in addition to Verizon, but rather including Verizon. So that's what the tower is related to. It can be structurally enhanced to add more, but if it stands right now, the 3 major providers out there, there are only 3 major providers. Almost all the other smaller ones that you hear about, Cricket, for example, are actually owned by the larger entities. Cricket is, for example, owned by Verizon. So in terms of producing those types of things, they'll use the Verizon equipment Cricket will to be able to operate. So they don't maintain independent technology on the tower. They use the tower's technology that they already have. So in event, so
That's also true of consumer cellular and Xfinity, et cetera, whoever else is offering service out there, they're using one of those 3 carriers.
they're using their equipment, basically. They're buying time, if you will, on their equipment. Next thing was about the soils report and engineering information as noted in this review. As we'd said before, with regard to the soils report, and in fact, Carlisle Warman says the same thing in their actual details in this thing. We'll provide the soils report at a little later time when we get to the site plan review period. Basically, until we've gotten approval that says we can actually use it for that purpose, we don't actually tend to do the soils report until that point. We have to produce that. So another thing I mentioned last time was that there are 24 different agencies, including yourselves, that have to approve each tower. And one of those agencies is, of course, the Drain Commission. So we have to provide them with soils reports when we do these things too. So we will do that at the same time as we provide them with the same materials. And so what we'd ask is that you give us an approval condition upon delivery of the soils reports at the time and prior to site plan approval. Next item was the emergency contact information. We provided a second entity, in our letter to you. A second person rather, not entity, second person for purposes of contact. Again, Mike Canterbury. It's identified on the page 2 of the letter that we sent over to the township. That party will be put on to before we get to the township board level. We'll add that to the maintenance plan that we've already submitted. We'll add his name in as a second name for which you can contact. Provide tree removal and preservation information. It's actually found already on page 3 of the site plan that was originally presented. It shows specifically what that thing is, what that's going to do as far as tree preservation. If there's any additional information you need besides what we've already provided, then we would happy to ask you to recommend approval with us modifying our site plan to show whatever additional information besides what we've already provided that's necessary with regard to tree removal and preservation.
One of the things we can do is make the X, and I'm not trying to be smart, but make the X bigger so that it shows which trees are going to be removed, but it is on that site.
Anyway, whatever you need from us, we'll be happy to provide. Show parking for service vehicles and provide adequate emergency vehicle circulation, which is similar to the Class C private road matters that was also mentioned. We have not at this point put that on the site plan itself. We are prepared to do whatever's necessary for purposes of doing that. There is plenty of room, according to our site plan engineer, to be able to put on the additional materials for purposes of, emergency vehicle access. And a Class C requirement, which is basically double the size of the width of the road, which is the basic reason that has to be changed. We're willing to do all of that. At this moment, we haven't made the decision about whether or not to seek a variance about that process. So we'll either ask you, we'll ask you to approve it and move it on to the township board, subject to the condition that we either change it, the site plan to comply with the Class C requirements, including the emergency vehicle turnaround, before we get to the township board, or make an application for a variance for that purpose, one of the two. And you could subject to your condition, your recommendation on either of those things happening by us before we get to the township board level. And that's basically going through I'm sorry?
Why would we do that?
Because Carla Wortman, for one, among other things, recommended it.
It's our consultant.
I know, I understand. But the reason why I'm asking you to do that in that circumstance is because we're trying to do this in the alternative. As we mentioned, we're happy to comply with the Class C requirements. But we've noted that in some other circumstances in the township, other towers have not been required to do that. And they've had a smaller.
Last 3 years?
I don't know, to tell you the truth. To tell you the truth, we don't know. And that's part of our investigation to determine whether or not we want to seek.
That's why I asked, what towers have you noted that on? And
Look at the 3 that I noted it on. The 3 I noted it on were the one that's on south of I-94 in Stabler. One that's south of I-94 and north of Jackson Fox, Ann Arbor. That's apparently a car dealership, I believe.
Well, south of Stabler, what is the other one?
South of I-94 and north of the Jackson Fox, Ann Arbor, dealership. And then there's a Watertown tower at Dexter and Forster.
I'm sorry, what was the third one?
Water Township, there's a water tower at Dexter, and I can't read my own writing. I think that's Forester. It might be Forester.
And Forester?
Right. The important part here is that we may not even request, any kind of.
You're bringing it up as a.
I'm asking you to do it conditionally. You can do either one. You can either require us.
For why we should do it today. So I understand, it's okay.
Well, I think any person this is a conditional use. It's not a site plan approval. So the idea is, what we're weighing is the location of this
That's it.
tower. Yeah, and does it meet the criteria for conditional use? Then the site plan, then they would have to do a Class C road unless they got the variance from the ZBA.
I'm very, very clear on that
Yeah.
point.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm very clear on that point. But I get to ask questions of this applicant.
Sure.
Because I may not like the conditional land use. And these things are relative to the conditional land use.
It is.
I'm not
And-
gonna approve a conditional land use and then surprise them with a dagger saying, oh, no, but you can't have this and you can't have that. So if I'm gonna approve a conditional land use, I'm gonna be upfront and I'm supporting the conditional land use. I mean, why would I approve something I don't support?
So, yeah, it doesn't have anything, I guess
Okay.
I was just
No, I don't
commenting on the ZBA piece, because we don't have the ability to say, to change that. We can only approve something that has a
Right.
Class
It's a
C road.
requirement under your ordinance. that it be
Right, we
Class
don't
C.
have
We don't.
a say, if the ZBA finds that they can grant a
Well, that's-
variance, we can't
We'll never-
overwrite.
So that is not true. This commission has approved approved projects short of requiring certain private roads and other things, signs and all other things that did not meet our ordinance in the past. That's why I asked this gentleman when these things happened in the last 3 years. So I hear you and I'm glad you're on it like that because that's how we should be operating. And I'm glad you're there. So, but that doesn't mean we haven't done it before because as Mr. LaBelle has pointed out, there are these other instances where he says we have done it. So,
Well, we don't know if the planning commission did it or the ZBA or what.
no,
the
we don't know those
circumstances
details, but he has put that forth as something that
Or
has
if it was
happened in our town.
before, or if it was before we had a private road ordinance.
Right.
That's it.
And we will determine that, as far as.
The point of the matter.
They will ask.
I think the
We'll be there long
point of
before
the
then.
issue is I'm responding
I think-
because there are situations and with prior, before I got on this commission, prior planning commissions did not follow our ordinance and it set us up for having to deal with questions like this. And you know it as well as I do. And, that's the point.
And I think the other thing to note would be a Class C ordinance will also may impact the number of trees that need to get removed, a Class C road.
Right.
And porosity and soil. and
Yeah,
all
the
that stuff.
retention,
Yeah.
detention,
Yep.
yeah, storm, all those things.
Which are all more or less site plan requirements, you know, which we haven't actually looking for an approval yet.
There's
It's another step.
I mean, I can see the advantages of both sides, you know, requiring a private road or allowing a variance so as not to have so much asphalt out there and so many trees taken out.
All grabbed.
No, but
Limiting the impervious surface.
that's right.
Yeah.
Crushed gravel, drainage and trees. I'm gonna take my lead on the fire department a lot and you know, what they think they need to get in and out of there.
Because that's the purpose of the
So
road.
we're here, well, I'll say that. I don't want to interrupt your
Um,
presentation.
I'm actually done.
Yeah, are you, yeah, because we should probably go to Carlisle Waterman, unless you have a specific question. Okay,
After Carlo.
all right, please go ahead, Mr. Luan.
Thank you. So I'm not going to go into any depth of our review because you guys have already reviewed this and from the discussion are very familiar with the circumstances. We have, as noted by the applicant, 7 items that we wanted further clarification on. The applicant has provided some of that clarification. They had indicated, and just for clarification on our part, I reviewed this project specifically, and the information that the applicant indicates was provided to the township was not provided to us, was not provided to the planning consultant. So I don't doubt that they provided some of this information at some point during the review process, but it did not get into our hands. And so that's likely why some of these questions were asked and perhaps that information was already provided. But,
Doug,
I
can I
think-
clarify that? Because you didn't get what was provided just a couple days ago.
Right.
Oh, I got that, yes.
It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
emailed to them.
You did that, but everything else then has been provided to you, correct?
No, we just, the stuff that was provided the other day, Friday, or I think it was Friday, addressed a number of these issues, but I have not seen any of that information until Friday.
Okay, but what they provided right before the last planning commission meeting, you did review.
Yes,
So Doug, you're talking about a letter from Mr. LaBelle dated October 3rd?
yes.
You didn't get that? You didn't
Yeah,
get that?
we did get that, yes, correct. Yep. And that addressed number 1, number 2 of my report. Number 3, the Class C private road is, as you were just discussing, is still outstanding. The soils report and engineering, I would agree that could be a site plan issue because this will be coming back for site plan review. They did add they will add a second contact person. They provided that information they provided. The tree removal and preservation certainly can be a site plan issue and would be addressed at that point. However, I couldn't tell, I've been reviewing site plans. This is not my first site plan I reviewed. I've been reviewing site plans for 30 years and I couldn't tell what trees were being removed and what trees were being preserved and what sizes and how big they were.
Yeah, it's just a list.
No, and Doug, and I understand that, when I've talked to the, engineer or PE, he said it was on there, but that's why, for clarification, we can make it bigger and, more definitive for you on
Yeah,
that
that's fair.
plan. Yep.
And that can be a final site plan issue
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
And then the parking of service vehicles, this is something we typically get for cell towers. Just to make sure if there are some employees parked out there and if there was an emergency that was to occur, that emergency vehicles will be able to get in and out without a problem being caused. So really the biggest issue of all of this at this point really is the Class C private road issue. And that's really going to be up to the planning commission, how you want to proceed. If you're not, you certainly could make a condition of approval that it just simply be a Class C private road. I mean, this is conditional use. The planning commission can make conditions, and if that's the way you want to go, it's going to be a Class C private road. I don't know of many, if any, other circumstances where less than a Class C private road was permitted for a tower. I'm fairly certain the tower that they're talking about near the auto mall is county operated and housed, I believe, some state police antenna, which is exempt from zoning, so we never would have reviewed that one. And there could be some other older ones, and I don't know the circumstances, but I would say that I would be somewhat surprised if the roads weren't Class C private roads pretty uniformly across these cell towers. I could be wrong, but I'd be surprised. So that's all. That's really up to you guys at this point. Again, the private road is the biggest issue I think that I see here.
I have a question for Doug.
Go ahead.
Doug, this is a question for you and the rest of the board members. I'm commission. When we have cell towers go in, this is the first time I've been reviewing one. This, and it's this near the border of our township. Do we need to coordinate this with other townships? Because this is going to affect their receptions. It easily will affect Ann Arbor Township. It'll easily affect Webster Township up there near Joy Road, just north of Joy. And if you look at the maps, the coverage maps, it doesn't get into the areas that are in our township that doesn't cover all of it. And in the surrounding ones, and between the antennas that are shown located there, there are missed coverages in between. Do they have a say in this? I mean, it's going into our township, so we have the authority to put it in or not, but we usually do reviews with the surrounding land, you know, plots of land, but this is a larger coverage item than that.
Are you asking if there was notification?
Yeah, should there have been any discussion with Webster and Dexter and Ann Arbor townships about the?
Yeah, I've
what
never heard of that. Well, it's certainly not a requirement that I'm aware of.
And it's not normally done, you're saying?
No, normally, I've never seen a discussion like that occurring across jurisdictional boundaries. The only, as I think Jan was alluding to, the only requirement would be to, you know, notify people within 300 feet. And if that happens to cross a jurisdictional boundary, those folks are also supposed to be notified and they could come to the meeting just like anybody else. But
Right, but 300, I mean, 30 feet is, you know, this is gonna cover a lot more area than
Yeah.
that. It's a broadcast antenna. So I wondered if there was some, if in other instances we had done that, any coordination like that.
no.
Okay. When it's time, I have questions on that subject
Yeah.
for them.
Okay.
I have a question.
Any other question for Doug?
I can, Doug, I may be looking at this all wrong. So the applicant is seeking a conditional use, land use approval. And the property is zoned A1 agricultural. In A1 agricultural, there is no permitted use for a cell tower or a conditional use for a cell tower. And as the previous memo, and I think even this current memo of October 1st mentions that it is a conditional use under L1, L2, L3, or LRP, industrial districts. So as part of this request, we're also going to be rezoning the property L1, L2, or L3.
No. So how cell tower special land use works is that it's kind of like a pyramid. And so we make it easier for an applicant if they do what we want and locate a tower where we want it to be located. And as they go away from the locations that we want, we make it more difficult. But communities can't make it so difficult that a tower is prohibited in certain areas that need coverage, basically. And that's federal law. So what we can't just prohibit that, although you're right, it's not listed in the ag district. However, how this sort of pyramid works is we want them to co-locate on existing towers first, and then we want them to locate on tall structures like buildings or high tension power lines second. And then we have a couple zoning districts that we would prefer them to be in, like third and fourth. And every time, if you read through the ordinance, it gets the review process gets a little more difficult, where first it's just a permitted use and you can get a zoning compliance and we'll sign off on it, to then it's a site plan, to then it's a conditional use. So finally, if they can't locate a tower location that is either in one of the places we want or in one of the zoning districts we want, it then becomes a conditional land use anywhere in the township. So we are not required or even being asked to rezone the property, but they have put forth the argument that, as you remember last time, they can't put it on the high tension power lines, which at one time was a solution. And it's listed in our zoning ordinance as such, but they say Verizon will not allow for safety reasons and so forth. So that one, although there's a high tension power line pretty close to this, they say they can't do that. And okay, so and for safety reasons. Then, so we suggested, well, why not in the industrial property on Sweepster, which is to the east or west of you? And they indicate that that will not solve the hole in the donut for their coverage. And so that's really what they have to prove to the township. You know, we can push for cell towers to be located in certain locations, but if the applicant can prove that those locations don't work, then we have to accommodate them. And how we do that is through special land use. And so a long-winded way to answer your question, we don't need to rezone the property. It can still stay agricultural. And it's really on the applicant to prove to Scio Township that they can't locate in those areas that we would prefer them to be. And that's what they did at the last meeting, I believe. I wasn't there, but I think that's what they did.
And that's where you, in your current October 1st memo, you outline that.
Yes,
in
exactly.
paragraphs 1 and 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation because as I thought about it, I'm like, well, how do we reconcile with our zoning? But thank you for that. And then the other question I have for you, I see. So all of these things you brought up in your memo, you're saying can be dealt with at the site plan stage?
Yes, I believe so. Yes, yes. And like I said, I'm not so inclined to give up on the Class C private road personally, for just emergency vehicle access reasons, but
Yeah.
they're
And
asking.
I'm not
so,
either.
you know, yeah.
Because when we met last time during the public hearing, I asked your colleague, I mean, why would we not require the Class C? I mean, what would be the reasons that we would set that aside? And another way of asking that question, why did we even require the Class C if we don't really need the Class C? I mean, we built this whole 9-page ordinance around Class A, B, and C. And so
Yeah.
I think
What?
Laura didn't know how to answer that, and maybe you have a little bit more history with this ordinance.
Yeah, I would say, so there, I would look at it in two ways. One, the Class C private road is a relatively minimal, safe road, a glorified driveway that the fire department has accepted as a safe access way. So that's why we would require it, because it is a known width and depth of material and compaction and all those things that the Scio Township Fire Department has accepted in the past.
Okay.
The reason you might want to forego those standards is if the applicant could show that the existing driveway was acceptable, and maybe the fire department would agree with that. Maybe it's less than 16 feet in width. And specifically, I've seen, people make the argument that they want to have less than a Class C private road to preserve natural features, because what could happen if this goes to a Class C private road is it's going to probably get widened a bit throughout the length of the drive, and there will very likely be additional grading required and tree removal required. So those would be typically the two reasons. One, why do we have it? Because it's a safe standard. Two, why would we try to not follow that standard? It would be potentially, one, the applicant have to show that what's existing is safe. And then two, that we would accept that less of a standard, and they would be cutting less trees and having less impact on the area. So those are the two ways. I haven't heard anything from the applicant that would, they have not made the argument yet that not putting it in would be better for the environment or, whatever.
Sure, I'll be hearing that.
Yeah.
Doug, I have two questions for you.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate you and miss you, man.
I have two questions for you. One is, with the Class C road, if that was required, would they need to do the stormwater management? And if so, would that include, the current impervious surface, calculations? And then the second one is, so what I caught from you that I wasn't aware of is we can do a conditional use with a condition that cannot be overwritten by the ZBA?
Yeah, if you make that condition, that's the condition.
Interesting.
I do. Have a question.
So watch out. Mr. Just.
No, but we're learning a lot, so thank you for, be patient. Go ahead, Bob.
Doug, have you seen the access information for this private road? Are they permitted to use this? I mean, have they been legally allowed to use this road?
I have not seen that information, no.
I didn't think so. Is that part of the site plan review, or is that part of this conditional use? I mean, in order to use it, they have to be able to drive in it.
Yeah, I mean, either is fine, actually. I mean, you guys could approve the tower if you wanted, and they would just, one of the conditions could be that they provide legal access to the site. And if they can't do that, you got to remember, if your guys' conditions aren't met, the site's not approved. I mean, so it's only approved when all of the conditions are met. So even if you guys, one of the conditions, if one of the conditions is, you have to show proper easement to get back to the site, and they don't provide proper easement, it's not approved. They can't go forward. But Jan, to answer your other question about the drainage, that's more of an OHM question, but there is a requirement for a Class C private road to account for the runoff that it's going to create.
So, Doug,
Yeah.
in your model motion, you say that the items outlined in your report dated October 1st, 2024, the reference, but there are 7 recommendations, right?
Yes.
Address, and one of the things you talk about is address the requirement for a Class C private road for site access. And then, so you've got 7 recommendations that would be part of the conditions, and then OHM has 10 of them, 12 of them. Right. So there are 19 specific conditions that if we were to pass the model motion would have to be, they would be incorporated into the site plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I was thinking about maybe saying something like applicant submit a site plan that includes a Class C private road or seek and receive a variance regarding the private road standards. So, I mean, I'm okay requiring a Class C road, or if it's for environmental concerns, and if the fire department's okay with something less, given there's not going to be people living there. So there's not gonna be people coming and going. I'm gonna defer to the environment, the impact on the
You
environment.
don't even know that right now. You're talking about.
No.
An idea.
No, the impact of the environment and what the fire department needs for to get to and from safely. If it's a Class D, it's a Class C. I mean, I'm not dying on this
Yeah, a
hill.
Class C is a Class C.
Yeah,
If the requirement is a Class C, by the fire department, he said.
Yeah.
Then he's gonna have a Class C.
It's required by our ordinance.
I
I
understand.
think you're
Gentlemen.
gonna slow this, gonna speed this up a little bit.
Well, excuse me, we're deliberating, thank you.
Okay,
I
I'm
think
just
he's
trying to
gonna
tell
say,
you can compel us to do a Class C, fine.
yeah, he's
Let's do that.
throwing the towel on
I
it.
think he's okay with A.
Yeah,
Yeah, if we wanna get
Is there
a
some
variance, we will do it.
reason Don't do it.
We don't have
when
that
our ordinance
information.
requires it.
But we don't have that information. And I guess I'm where John is let's get the information. If it means whacking dozens of trees, then maybe we have something. The applicant's got to get semis in there to get the sections of the tower. And if you can get a semi in there, you can probably get a fire truck.
That's so keenly rational. But the problem is when we make those kind of, because I agree with that statement, I can wholeheartedly agree with. I can wholeheartedly understand the rationale that John just said. The problem is you're going against our ordinance.
We're in agreement. The ordinance says it's a class C. The only way they can get relief from that is going to the ZBA, which is why the ZBA exists. To get relief from the ZBA, and I can't speak for everyone, you're gonna have the fire, you're gonna have to prove some sort of environmental impact. Otherwise, why would we grant a variance?
We
So-
being the ZBA.
We being the ZBA,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
so
Not the planning commission.
not the planning.
I'm with everybody on that item too, and so it sounds like the applicant.
And
But
that
to
I
Doug's
wanted-
point, we can require a class C, and they ain't got no avenue of relief to the ZBA.
Right.
Exactly.
Not that I want to belabor the point, but I just did some rough estimating on Google Earth, and there will definitely be some trees there.
Sure.
Bob,
So are we moving on from just questions for Doug?
yeah,
It sounds like we have.
I think so. Everyone,
Doug,
oh, OHM, we didn't hear
Yeah.
OHM's.
Did you have questions?
I had a
for Doug?
question for Doug.
Oh, okay,
So
go.
Doug, normally conditional use, and I reviewed the site plan that they submitted, they just have a ground lease of some sort with the landowner. Normally a conditional use runs with the land, but because it's part of a large parcel and we're just doing it for their footprint, I guess, and there's no land division, is that all correct?
It's correct that it runs with the land, so it will, whatever property this is on, it's good, indefinitely. They could sell the tower and to other users, and so I don't know if that answered your question, but
But
yeah.
it has to be on that
Are
site,
you asking? to
as
go
shown
to
by the
Yeah.
site.
higher
plan.
Yeah, in theory, if they want to put another cell phone tower someday for who knows what reason on the other side of the site, they would have to go back through the site plan approval process, is what you're saying?
Not only that, not only that, but they'd have to go back through special land use approval.
Gotcha, that makes sense.
Yeah, special land use approval is good for what they're showing, and and there's a certain intensity level. If they're increasing any special land use, if the applicant's increasing the intensity, they have to come back.
Okay, thank you.
All right, OHM.
My review is actually pretty brief, so I'll be quick. We recommended the conditional use in our letter from October 2nd. We previously offered a number of site plan comments, and we included those in our letter again. So similar to Doug, those can all be addressed formally during the site plan review. So none of those affect our conditional use recommendation.
You have-
Specific for OHL, I don't want to.
Yeah, any questions? All
No,
right, now you have a
Okay.
question for the applicant.
I do. I just want to point out that you've addressed what Carlisle Wortman's letter required you to give additional information. But in our previous meeting, you were asked questions about what if the cell tower was higher? And I don't see any new maps produced.
So,
We have looked into it.
we have looked into it. As of right now, Verizon has a site identified on the west side of the township. The site's name is Baker and I-94. Okay. The site act that I talked to today has identified a site, and he's in lease negotiations with the owner right now. And so once that lease negotiation is followed through with, then they would do the same thing and go to hearing. And I didn't get a chance to look to see, whether it's in Scio or whether it's over in Lima, I'm not sure which. But it is planned for the, west side. So all of that territory on the west side that's funky, would be addressed, with that one.
Well, I hear you, what you're saying, but specifically, did anybody do the two calculations you said you were going to
Yes,
do?
We did.
Yes, we
And
did.
Do you have that available for us?
We could provide it to you, but it was a minimal modification. What we did was we had two things done simultaneously. We first had new prop maps done that would show what would happen if we went up another 10 feet, which is the maximum we could go before we're going to exceed the FAA requirements. That would not permit us to have to plate the tower, et cetera. So we did that. But at the same time as we were doing that, we checked into, okay, are we going to address the sites on the west and the east? You know, the open areas on the west and the east. And we did this sort of simultaneously. It's clear from what's talking about there, it will be better to address the west and east with additional towers to the west and the east, because that will cover the entire area. If you just simply increase the size of the existing tower, we're talking about another 10 feet, it'll cover a tiny little portion, maybe, of the missing areas to the west, maybe to a little bit, and a lesser degree to the east. But it just simply doesn't make sense. As I mentioned before, best idea is always to try to create a footprint where the cells all match up with each other and you cover the entire area with, the towers that are actually going to cover it in that circumstance. So as you mentioned already, we've got one that was already in lease negotiation, so that's coming up soon.
So let's hear about this word. How long has this tower that we're talking about here been in the stage that you were in lease negotiations until this point in time? Is that like years or months or weeks?
Depends on the ones you're dealing with,
But
but
you said you had all these other permits that you have to go through. So I'm assuming that you've gone through a lot of hoops already for this one.
Yes.
So you're gonna have to go through a lot of hoops.
You're probably talking about, from the time that that lease is signed, you are probably talking about 9 months, from start to finish. Now, that is, 3 to 4 months worth of NEPA reporting that has to be done in the National Environmental Association. Or
National Environmental Protection Action.
yeah, thank you. A lot of the other stuff is going on concurrent to that. So we're, but from the, if we started, let's say we got the lease signed tomorrow, probably the least we could do it in is 9 months. Okay,
Okay, you've given me an idea that it's not that long. What I'm not pleased about is that you're not showing us what you're telling us about going up. In fact, I thought you said you were gonna go up 10 feet and then you tell us what it would take or what height it would take to actually cover more area if you were to go above the FAA limit of 200.
Oh, I thought we did, when we talked about it, that we were trying to avoid going above the FAA limit because of the light. So we didn't even consider that as a possible. I'm sorry, that's my fault then.
yes, I didn't do it, as far as above 190, simply because, or 195, simply because of the lighting issue. I just know what's gonna happen if the light goes on there, I mean, from the standpoint of neighbors.
And
And I know you've already had your public hearing and that can go by the wayside, but I also look out for neighbors when it comes to that I'm happy to show you that map.
we can provide it.
I can provide it right now if I go out to my car and get it in the,
I have copies here.
but it is negligible.
Why don't you take that in with the site plan? But that's just me talking right for the moment.
I can do
But I
that.
have some more questions for you.
Yeah, sure.
You say that there will be multiple antennas up there from multiple companies, up to 3. You're expecting the other 2 to join.
Up to
you,
2
but-
more.
Two more, total of 3,
Yeah.
total of 3.
So there'll be 3 up there, and where are those other companies' antennas that are like, you've showed where Verizon's antennas are and what the how you keep them from having interference and by keeping them far enough apart, but close enough together so that they provide coverage, like your coverage maps are showing.
Right.
Are they at the same towers that Verizon's antennas are at?
I don't know that. I'm not privy to AT&T's or T-Mobile's locations.
However,
However,
it has been our, okay, this is gonna sound like a commercial, but Verizon gets there first. As a general matter, that's what happens. Verizon gets to these locations that are holes and they cover them. If Verizon has a hole, almost all certainly, the other carriers have that same hole. In that case, that almost always is the case. So let me try to finish up there, okay? So as a general matter, because that's what happens, that's the process that's been followed on the hundreds of towers that are across Michigan. The footprints of the individual providers has begun to look the same. Because they follow one another as a result, going on the towers. I'm sorry?
On the same pole?
Yeah, on the same pole.
Okay.
And if you take a look at the site plan where we show there's a little tiny depiction, sorry, it's a little tiny, but it's a tiny depiction of the monopole, and it shows 3 different sets of, they're called platforms, on which the antennas are set out. It's a triangular platform on which there's 3 to 4 antennas on each side.
Okay.
And what'll happen is they end up going to things. So the bottom line out of this is that we, in this circumstance, represent Vertical Bridge, not actually Verizon. And we're doing this because we know for a fact, in terms of talking about this, that other parties are gonna wanna go on this tower in order to be able to provide their.
You're not the.
Exactly.
right.
We use Verizon's data because we don't.
And they fight for position on whoever gets the highest.
Whoever's here first.
So Verizon contracts with Vertical Bridge to put the tower up, so Verizon gets top spot.
Okay. And then,
And
They got the
then
first in.
Vertical Bridge will go out to AT&T and out to T-Mobile and say, we have a tower here. Do you want to go on it?
And how far down the pole, what height will they be?
They would be, it's 10 feet apart, so it's
10 feet apart?
10 feet apart.
So 180 and 170.
Correct.
So
So
we're gonna get worse, and we're not gonna get better and better. We're gonna get lower and lower.
A little bit lower.
a little bit lower each time.
We're still in competition with each other. Those individual parties are still in competition with each other in terms of trying to do this. And Verizon,
Sure.
Really sure that the 3 providers are going to have the same coverage.
but what can we do about
Showing
that?
here.
What can we do about that as a planning commission, Bob?
We're not here to
Make them
regulate.
go higher, make them go
Well,
300?
Do I think this is a good site? That's where I have to decide tonight, and you have to decide tonight. Is this a good site? And if it's a good site for what they're proposing is going in there, that means they're gonna have good coverage.
Right, but
If
we
it's
can't
bad
have
coverage,
sites,
it's not
we can only review the site they've requested to put it on.
Right, but they're putting it on one site, 3 different heights.
Right.
They're not talking about that until now. And T-Mobile and AT&T are not gonna have probably the same coverage maps that were being shown. I don't even know where their other antennas are. I'm assuming that they're in the same place as Verizon's, but I wanted to hear what they had to say.
The
If
only
we
place I can tell you that AT&T is on that water tank at Sweepster. They are on that.
They're also on our water tower as the township. We receive rent from them.
Okay.
let me try to point out what you're talking about in this case. I understand what you're saying, but there are certain limitations on what we can do. For example, your own ordinance says we gotta have 1 tower. We could have equivalent services by every single provider by making 3 towers, all right on top of each other. You could put a whole bunch of other things, but your thing says specifically, we can't do that.
Not trying to get you to do that, but the height question comes into play here in that if 190 is better than 180, is better than 170, you're not talking about that. And yet we're going to have 1 tower there with 3 different providers at 3 different heights.
So what you're really saying is the argument would be for the best possible coverage for all 3.
Yeah.
It would be
Might have to be
190-foot
Well,
tower.
or it might have to be at 220
Well,
For the top one.
Without the coverage map for each individual
Right.
carrier, we
You
can't
can't
make
do
that
That's
decision.
right, that's
So
right.
we don't know who's where on each tower and how high each tower is.
So
Is
how
that our
would you,
function?
how would
So,
you
I
decide that
think
this
that-
is a good site
Right. Well,
for
or,
this, for a tower?
so I
If you
think,
don't know that it's gonna provide coverage for the other, they're gonna automatically get two more carriers. You don't have to come back to us, do you?
and we're not objectionable, but correct me if I'm wrong, I think what Bob is speaking to is the general requirements for approval of a conditional land use found in section 36-224. And underneath 36-224, as laid out in, Carlisle Wortman memo, there are 6 things that we should look at in the decision. And I think,
D says engineering justification for height, so. you
well, let
want-
me finish, so.
Oh, I
No,
would.
compatible, well, number 3, that the proposed use will be served adequately by essential public facilities and disposal, or that the persons or agencies responsible for the establishment of the proposed use shall be able to provide adequately any such service. So
Yeah.
I think what Bob is trying to say is, what we approve here tonight or not has to do with what kind of service is the township looking for its residents? Not trying to regulate, what's the name of the company, Bridge? Vertical Bridge, or regulate Verizon or any of the others, but when we make these decisions about what services come in here, I think Bob is kind of focusing in on how that impact of the service, what kind of service is really being provided by our residents.
Can I respond to any of this?
yeah, you can.
Sure. All right. To begin with, Mr. Reiser's, is it Reiser? Okay, Mr. Reiser's absolutely correct. What you're reviewing right now is what we proposed. Not what could be additionally be able to propose. One of the criteria for saying yes or no to this is not, would it be better? Can I do their business better than they do? And make it a little bit, make it a higher cover. And I understand what you're gonna say. You think that it's necessary, if we can get up to 220, we could get everybody in and getting out just as much coverage in that case. Well, what was already pointed out is you don't know what the coverage maps of the other parties look like. And with regard to this or may or may not be the case. AT&T, for example, because it's located on that water tower, may in fact want to be at a lower level because that fits better with their footprint. To place it at a lower level, it will fit it better. Remember, I talked about destructive interference between competing towers. So the matter of whether or not it's going to be able to cover out of this is only the question of how much height we can do. The justification that provided in your email or in your ordinance about a justification for a height is a justification of a maximum height, not a minimum. All right, it's talking about, you have to justify having a tower this high. Is what it's really doing. Excuse me, I want to take back. Okay. You're telling us that the tower has to be that high, the antenna broadcast tower has to be that high for the coverage that you're trying to achieve. That's it. So you show us, this is the coverage, this is the height I need. And we approve it as that's a good site because it's giving us the coverage that is good enough for our residents. But what you're also saying is there's going to be 2 more broadcast towers up there that we aren't even, I mean, not towers, antennas up there, 2 different companies that we're not even seeing the data on. And we're to approve this site as good enough for them too, because they're gonna go there without us reviewing it, period. I think the way you're phrasing it is what the problem is. You are not approving this as whether this is a good enough site. You are not, as a board, deciding whether or not we've located this correctly. Or whether we have in fact put it's a high enough tower, or whether it's gonna be doing that. Excuse me, You have sir. to deal with yours. I beg to differ. You must show that the height variance from our ordinance is justified by the coverage. It's specifically what it says. It's talking about a maximum height there. It's saying you're supposed to be providing the minimum height necessary to achieve the coverage. That's what it's trying to do. This does provide the minimum height necessary. Yeah, it's trying to
We have
prevent,
Justify going higher than our requirement, and that's what they're trying to do. They're showing that they need to go to the 190.
no,
To
we
get
don't
the
need.
coverage that they want.
No,
We
we've only-
specifically have shown that we don't need to do that.
We only need to go to the tower is 180 feet.
Oh, excuse me. Yes.
Tower's
So-
180, which is what your ordinance is. Your ordinance calls for 180 feet. Unless we need to go higher, and we have to prove that we need to go higher.
That's the
Not
5
the other
foot
way around.
antenna, whatever.
So
Yeah,
Lightning.
the
Lightning rod.
lightning
Plus
rod,
the
yes.
5
I'd
foot.
like to address something, because I think I heard Commissioner Yeaple say this is the commercial fathers to decide all these things. He didn't say that, but that's what I kind of picked up on. This should be left to the,
Say that again.
what was it that you said? This should be left to
I
the,
mean, frankly.
what's the phrase you used? Should be left to.
Frankly, if they have the money and they meet all of our conditions, AT&T has a big pile.
Should be
of
left
money.
to the public sector to decide.
Yeah, T-Mobile has a big pile of money. All of them
So-
can get a big fight and find the best location that works for them, and we're here to meet our conditions.
Right.
We're not here to see
So
you as.
that's one way of looking at life. And then there's another one, which is more of a community minded, I'm not trying to, maybe I don't want to use words that seem, but there's another way of looking at it, and I'm listening to everybody speak on this topic, and that is, what's good for, I mean, besides the 180 and what our zoning says, but another thing that I think as a public body, we have to look at is what's the best way of us providing, allowing the public sector to come into the community, as you have done, that provides the best service to our community. Do we want thousands of towers, or do we want the best locations we can get with the best coverage? And that's what you're seeing, some of these questions coming out. So it's not about, because if it weren't you, somebody else would be coming here and wanting to put a tower in. So I'm not against the tower. I'm just trying to understand it better as a layperson.
We can go to 195 with a 4-foot lightning rod. So we would be at 190, the next guy would be at 180, which is essentially where we would be.
As you submitted.
Yes, and then the third guy would be at 170. And you're not gonna see much difference between 170 and 180 as far as coverage wise. You see a little bit of difference between 190 and 170, but you're,
Like if
yes, yes,
Oh, we only need 150 because of this.
yes.
We got a ginormous tower here.
And that might be what AT&T in particular does.
Yes,
In the middle of antennas.
Okay.
yeah, I've seen, particularly T-Mobile, and I don't know if it's because of the frequencies they're using or not, but they are lower in a lot of circumstances, and I'm going, why would you do that? But it might be because of where another tower is that I'm not privy to.
You're not going to 190 instead of 180 because it's a few extra bucks, or just because you don't need it? Or because it's
We,
riskier to fall, or?
no. We don't need it, number one, to provide our service, but meeting your ordinance, if we go to 190, obviously, dollars is, a consideration, but nothing major in this overall scheme of things. We will have to redo some of our environmental reports, because when we file at all of the NEPA reports, et cetera, we file at 180 with a 5-foot lightning rod. We would have to go back and get those redone. Now, that's an amendment to the NEPA reports, and trying to think what other reports, but we would have, that would be the other reason that we would, if we go back, we would have to do some additional environmental. But going to 195, we can do. I can't stress enough to you staying under that 200-foot level, because
You're expecting to have pushback from the visibility of that light.
I'm not. You are. And I'm trying to be funny there, but seriously, the biggest question that.
Right, you are approving this, we are.
Right, that's correct. And the biggest thing that I get question wise when I go to zoning hearings is, will there be a light on it? And when we tell them no light, they're the happiest people in the world.
I thought about it at the last meeting, so I understand what you're saying.
And I will tell you, I have a 400-foot tower in my front window. And it has lights on it and they blink at night and they are on during the day. I never notice it. Okay, and it's not because I'm in the industry, it's because I've gotten so used to it that I walk out my front door, I look out my front window, it's right there. I mean, dead center in that window, and I don't see it.
How often does the train go by? So often you won't even notice it.
But it's the same thing. We can go to 195 if that helps. We'll just have to do a few more environmental.
Yeah, that's why I was asking if it would help, and yet.
No, if it will help you, not help. I mean, if you want to see it from a good neighbor standpoint or
Would it help with service?
Would it help the coverage?
it will help the coverage minimally. As far as for us going from 175 up to 180 or 190, that would help. Minimally, and when I say that, the one guy that was looking at the map for me said, you need a magnifying glass to see the difference here.
I'll take you to say, but I'd like to see.
But yeah, and I will show it to you.
And I have one
Yeah,
last
so-
question.
Just one basic point to make here. These two open spaces, they're not gonna be gone when it gets to 195. They're still gonna be there. That 195 is not going to appreciably reduce the size of these two. New tire,
That little bit in the middle.
sorry,
About that little bit in the middle.
you talking about right here?
Yellow,
Between
that's.
the two red, the yellow section in between the
Oh.
two red sections.
Yeah, that section right there, that's just a vagary created by the towers and the tower height. That's gonna be covered there will be pretty much green anyhow, regardless related to that point. But these ones over here are the ones that you're gonna have bigger things.
Will go green.
Yeah.
If you go to 195. Again, that's what I was saying.
No, I think
Stay green.
it would be.
It'll
It'll
stay
stay
green.
green.
Oh, it's still rural.
This is a vagary talking about essentially consider like rounding error. In terms of dealing with it, that's the reason why there's this little tiny ring around there. You're still gonna get coverage there, just as
There's a ring around there. I'm talking about the yellow that's in between.
here and here,
Yeah. green.
those two.
Back, no, start sliding slower and I'll say. stop.
Sorry.
No, you look at the map so you can see. To
All right, so where am I going?
the left, into the yellow area, keep going, right there. That blob of yellow, are you taking that out with 195? Okay, that's what I wanted to see.
No,
That's what we talked about it's the yellow areas that are left in between your towers.
no,
We're still gonna have to put up towers to cover those two areas where there's the other one.
yeah, and
This is considered.
so that, so the tower that we talked about earlier, that's over on the one that's called Baker 94. That will help a lot of that yellow area.
You're calling it Baker 94, but I see something that's called Hudson Mills and it's nowhere near Hudson Mills. It's just a name, so.
It's considerably south of
It's-
that.
Station of Baker and 94.
That's what the RF calls it.
Yeah.
The search ring that I saw was basically on Parker, was where the center of the,
Figured it wouldn't. be.
yeah, yeah.
I have a feeling it might be Mr. Johnson's billboard site.
Oh.
I don't know for sure, but it could be.
But no,
We saw the
so
billboards.
that Baker 94 site that will be on Parker or near Parker, will help a lot of that yellow. I can't guarantee you that it's gonna turn it all green.
We won't know until we see those coverage.
Right, but, right.
So my last question is, on page 3 of your submission,
Which one?
it was,
Good question.
September 20th. A letter from W.W. Marvin.
That's Rob.
And that was on page 3 of that. states, want to get it right. States that even though for maximum coverage, Verizon would have preferred a taller tower. Why would that statement be made? Does Verizon want a taller tower and they were talked out of it because of the 200-foot height limit or
Yeah.
what?
I mean, basically, the 200-foot height limit is trying to, okay, so I remember before I said there's 24 different agencies that we're trying to deal with. One of them, of course, is the FAA. And in terms of trying to deal with this, staying below 200 is a necessary requirement to try to make the least obtrusive alternative we can have. That's one of our requirements that we have legally to comply with, the least obtrusive alternative we can manage. And least obtrusive includes not a light on the top of it. So from that standpoint, that's one of the things we would do. If you're just considering it solely from an RF standpoint, you might go a lot higher. I think if you have no other, you're not considering any other concerns in that circumstance. There is a point of diminishing returns. You get high enough, you're getting far enough away from the ground, it's actually dispersing the signal. Think of it like a light. Doing that kind of thing kind of gets dimmer as you get farther away. But at some point you get a diminishing return and that comes out of it, but you can go with higher towers. Ben just talked about the 400-foot tower that's next to him. So it can be done in those circumstances, but as a general matter, we have found that the best coverage is obtained in the most least obtrusive way by creating sub 200-foot towers in those now 3 locations that you're most concerned with. The ones to the east and west of the proposed tower and the proposed tower. That's the reason why we do that in terms of dealing with it. So yeah, we do and say from a pure RF standpoint, yeah, you might want to try to go a lot higher. But that's not the only consideration here. There's 23 other agencies and their considerations, plus our concerns for our customers and what they want out of our towers. They don't want to see the tower if they don't have to. And again, not having a light is a big deal.
Yes, I'm gonna get into logic.
Mhm.
You guys are in the infrastructure business, is essentially what it is.
Correct.
And in this case, Verizon is the first customer, so they have a choice.
Correct.
My guess is your salespeople are already talking to T-Mobile and AT&T. Do they have any problem with the height of the tower?
So the vertical bridge does not like to go to the others until they have approval. However, once they have approval, they're there. I talked to Vertical Bridge yesterday about another site. And he said, okay, fine, I will have that one's not approved, but I'll have my salesman go talk to T-Mobile about that one. But that's not their typical until they know that site's being built. They're not going out there. Once they know that they are building, they are on it.
They don't go specifically to them. They won't literally say, I want you on this tower, come on in, until they've got the actual approval. But do conversations occur? Of course they do. Prior to that time period. And all of the other entities, AT&T, T-Mobile, et cetera, have in general sort of made a decision to, in some circumstances, their business plan to try to follow up after they get, they see other parties go in, most often Verizon.
It's amazing. One day Verizon will be up and then 6 months later, you'll see another one on there.
Or less.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, that's the type of thing that happens. You just.
So it answered your
It
basic
follows.
question.
It follows, yeah.
Have other ones contacted us about it? Yes, sort of. They haven't formally contacted for that purpose until we actually get the approval for purposes of it, but they will flow in. That's what standard operating procedure. It happens every time.
I just wanted to be clear because.
Yes.
And they're not having any problems with the dates, the levels that they're going to be put in at this point. They're not identifying it as an issue.
There's a software company here in Ann Arbor that just launched in the last 6 months that data mines, and it's like ours for companies like theirs. For things like what they're trying to do. Wow. Yeah, one of my friends now works for it, so that's why I'm aware of it, but yeah.
Somebody's at.
Verizon's not the clients.
Interesting. Okay,
Who else?
yeah, any other?
Briefly,
Where-
how quickly does, I mean, how closely does the calculated coverage map match in actual when you look at it later?
It's pretty good. It really is. They've had enough experience in these models, that, they're pretty accurate. They might get fooled because of this happening or that happening, but typically it's pretty spot on.
And I cut you off earlier, but you were saying that the circle around the antenna location is probably an aberration of the, you know, the calculations.
Yeah, consider it rounding error. Consider it rounding error in terms of dealing with it. Part of the reason why is because there's all those trees immediately adjacent to the actual tower. So, you know,
That's one of the factors you take into account.
And then the
so,
other thing
and
is-
so, you know, you're talking about a non-occupied area that potentially is going to be affected by it. And in reality, it's basically the same coverage.
All right, commissioners, where are people at? What's wrong with the,
Thinking it's pretty good location for the other antenna. I just hadn't, I haven't been convinced about height, but I see the point about not subjecting people to a flashing light too, but, and I can see that from the photographs, you can see it on Huron River Drive.
Yeah.
So if you can see it on Huron River Drive, Black Alpine can probably see it, you know, but.
and that's I mean, it's not dense, but there are a lot of residents there.
Uh-huh.
All right, thoughts, so there's the location.
I support this. I mean, this is their business. They do their research. They know where their needs are. They know where the farmers and landowners have the property at the right height that'll lease to them. So I mean, I'm not gonna fly spec them on their thing. For me, it's really about that Class C road. It sounds like they're willing to build the thing. The only reason for not doing it, from my perspective, is if it's better for the environment, they gotta take a ton of trees out of there. So if we wanna put a Class C in and tear their trees down, then so be it. These guys are willing to put a Class C in.
I want to clarify our position. I'm sorry. What I said was, and just to get by this, you know, leave it as the Class C in this circumstance. If we want to try to do something about it, we have to go to the zoning board of appeal anyhow. So that's what we would end up doing. I'm requesting that you not foreclose us in that possibility because of just exactly what you just proposed. The fact that environmentally, it might be better off leaving more trees.
And we can have a survey or whatever done that would give us the information
So
before we would ever go to ZBA.
I'm flexible on the Class C. I'm okay compelling it, because if that's what we want to do, we do it. On the other hand, if we've accommodated other requests for a private road to nowhere other than a tower that some truck goes to, I just don't see a lot of traffic to and from on that tower. And when the fire department needs to get to that tower, whenever that is, they'll be able to get to that tower if Chief Hood says they can. And I looked at the plan, you know, the packet, and the fire department wasn't opposing the road as constructed. So if it's good enough for the fire department, it's good enough for me. I defer to them. I'm okay with a condition that says the applicant submit a site plan that includes a Class C private road or seek and receive a variance regarding the private road standards. So I'm okay saying, put it in unless you convince another body that you don't need it based on environmental, or, you know, maybe gravel becomes so expensive and you can't afford 2 more feet on each side. I don't know. That's sarcasm. So, I propose to move the model with that condition. Based on the information received from the applicant and reflected in the minutes of this meeting and the public hearing held on September 23rd, the planning commission finds that conditional use and related information received by the township meets the required standards and finding for a conditional land use and recommends approval. Specifically, it is found that the following required standards and findings found in section 36-224 of the zoning ordinance have been demonstrated by the applicant. A, it will be harmonious and in accordance with the objectives and regulation of this ordinance. B, it will be compatible with the natural environment and existing and future land uses in the vicinity. C, that the proposed use will be adequately served by essential public services and services such as highways, streets, police and fire protection, drainage ways, refuse disposal, or that the persons or agencies responsible for the establishment of the proposed use shall be able to provide adequately any such service. D, that the proposed use will not be detrimental, hazardous, or disturbing to the existing or future neighboring uses, persons, property, or the public welfare. E, that the proposed use will not create additional requirements at public cost for public facilities and services that will be detrimental to the economic welfare of the community. And finally, F, it will be compatible with the township's adopted general development plan. Further, the Planning Commission recommends the following conditions be placed on the subject's conditional land use. One, that the items outlined in the planner's report dated October 1st, 2024 are addressed and incorporated into the plan. Two, the items outlined in the engineer's report dated October 2nd, 2024 are addressed and incorporated into the plan. And thirdly, that the applicant submit a site plan that includes a Class C private road or seek and receive a variance regarding the private road standards. That's got it. Oh, with support.
That was a support. Okay. Further discussion. I would just like to note, I would support it, and I would want, if they did seek relief from the zoning board of appeals, that the zoning board of appeals and the applicant have adequate information to weigh the benefit of stormwater management on the site and the tree removal, that there'd be adequate information for that, you know, if you seek relief to look at, to justify the environmental, an environmental benefit.
Is that a comment or is that a condition that the applicant shall, if they seek a variance, that they provide the ZBA with sufficient, you know, these suggestions are nice, but they kind of don't count in the end.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
Tend to do that anyway.
yeah.
That's,
But-
I thought that, yeah, I thought that would be their analysis.
Okay, that would
So
be
you're
their
pointing
analysis,
out-
but I'm trying to emphasize that there's a positive with the stormwater mitigation, balancing the tree removal.
The other question that,
Which means they would need to really look at the engineering of a Class C road to determine that, I trust the ZBA, but at the same time, I want to make sure that, you know, that balance is verifiable with the submission.
It's never wrong to give them a little nudge. That's fine.
survey, of course, would be a good idea, and it was brought up that some of those trees might not be all that old because that was gravel before,
Yeah,
so.
So I have a
I drove back there.
point of clarification.
yes,
So as I understand, the motion for Mr. Reiser is that the approval for the conditional land use, with the condition that the applicant provide a site plan with a Class C private road or seek a variance with the.
Seek and receive. They just don't gotta look for it, they also gotta get it.
Seek a variance with the ZBA and approve.
Seek and receive a variance regarding the private road standards. And I'm also, if.
That's with the ZBA.
Yes.
Yes, and I am willing to incorporate Jan's suggestion that if the applicant seeks a private road variance, it shall provide the ZBA with, stormwater, or what do you want?
Stormwater mitigation and tree removal considerations.
yeah, the adequate information to determine the environmental trade-offs between stormwater management and tree preservation.
Trees or vegetation?
What?
Tree-
Tree preservation.
Trees? Okay.
Tree
So
preservation.
if the applicant seeks a private road variance, it shall provide the zoning board of appeals with additional information regarding stormwater management and the preservation of existing trees. Is that right? Is that, that's friendly to the neighbor?
How about to the support?
Or I would agree.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Gable,
Yes.
Riser. Yes. Walsh, yes. Moore,
Yes.
Hyde. Yes. Overby.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much.
In point of information, can we ask, when will the township board meeting be? What consider this?
Basically, we need to approve our minutes, and it goes and it's put on the agenda, basically, the supervisor and, determines based on,
Our next,
Agendas and
our
so
next regular meeting is scheduled for October 23rd, which we will approve the minutes of this meeting. And then it could go on the next meeting of the Board of Trustees, subject to approval, which is a great question, because the election, it's like November 12th.
November 12th.
Yeah, because of early voting, this room is used, so.
Just so you know, guys, if you're writing it down, if the applicant, number 4 was, if the applicant seeks a private road variance, it shall provide the ZBA with additional information regarding storm water management and the preservation of existing trees.
You normally go to CBA before you're going to the board for approval.
They could go to the board for the conditional
Yeah, they can-
use approval, and then they could do ZBA.
Remember, this is our recommendation to the board,
Yeah.
so the board could decide otherwise.
But,
The ZBA would happen afterwards.
He's just asking what order we need to do things.
yeah, that's all I'm looking for is the order that we would have to do it in.
You're saying that they should go to the ZBA after the board?
That makes most sense to me.
Yeah, because otherwise they don't have a conditional.
This is not the actual conditional use
The board
permit.
could say, no, we're not gonna, we will approve it with the condition of a Class C road change.
And I've actually had it both ways, so that's why I'm asking. I've had to go to the ZBA first, and I've had to go to the board
But
first.
before the site plan.
Yep.
Obviously.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's get it up for Christmas, fellas.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Our best.
Thanks.
All right, here we go.
Or are you gonna propose green and red lights?
Take the whole thing and turn it into a Christmas tree. There we go.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh, control.
So my next question, if I may,
Sure.
is we have to get site plan approval.
Yes.
When does that take place?
It's the same process. You have to submit. The reviews have to be done, put on our agenda. And is that correct, Doug, or does it, the site plan yeah, because we have to do the site plan approval, right?
Yeah, site
Right, we do,
plan,
and then it goes to BOT.
yeah, it kind of, well, it's not really specific in the ordinance, but they may apply for site plan before it gets township board approval at their own risk. Because the risk would be that
yeah.
township board wouldn't approve it, but they in theory could tomorrow go ahead and apply for site plan. There's nothing that says you can't do that.
Begin the process with you.
Apply a site plan with the PC.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
it's to the planner.
And Doug, does the planning commission make the decision or does the township board make the decision?
BOT here.
We recommend.
Township
Still
board.
recommendation
Approved.
at this level? Okay.
Not in our.
It, some townships do in fact provide
That's
at
true.
this level,
Yeah,
but
but
I just
we have
wanna
the
know.
double
We're just a
recommending body.
So
Fine.
it's a site plan approval with the PC,
Yep,
then it's the board,
yep,
and then it's ZBA.
if you want
If
to.
Well,
we
I
want-
would
if we wanna
do
go there.
I would do your ZBA before you did your site plan, possibly, because then you'd have to,
You'd have to
you
rejig
wouldn't know
your
which
site
way
plan.
you were gonna do the road.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you'd
I
spend
think
more
I-
money on your engineers.
So give me that again as far as what you want us to do.
It's not what we want. I mean, basically, you could go through site plan approval, but you'd have to do it with a Class C road.
With one or the other, your choice.
Yeah.
What do you think you're gonna get approved?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could interject, the, the ordinance does say that for projects that require site plan approval, it has to go to site plan first before ZBA, so they would actually have to go in front of you
Oh,
first.
Interesting.
Oh, good. Thanks for looking it up, Doug.
And that's to allow the planning commission to provide input, so that the ZBA could see that in the minutes.
no, that makes sense.
So
Well,
site
how
plan
about that?
approval, board, and then ZBA.
So what you said first time.
What I said the first time.
So it's antenna revenue rental versus time.
Time.
Great. Yeah, we'll have to make a decision one way or another about that. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right,
I look forward to seeing you.
I look forward to seeing you. I'll be on the board after November 20th.
I know you will be.
It'll be fun.
all right.
Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.
About the business.
Hey, I'm not trying to make it seem.
No, I think that, I mean, that's.
All right, we're gonna move on. We have, no new business, our reports. Yes.
Mine speaks for itself. Call me if you have any questions.
You're ready to go home.
I got another commitment.
I have no report. We're meeting this Thursday, so.
All right. DDA,
They paved Dino and Betty Drive, so
It's
that's
good over
exciting.
there. I drove it.
Yep, I drove it this morning.
right?
Huron River Watershed Council, I just want to say that they're looking for volunteers for their river roundup. It's this Saturday, October 12th. And what that involves, if people want to volunteer, if people in the public want to volunteer to help them assess the health of the rivers by picking up bugs and insects from the river and helping their experts identify them. That takes place Saturday. You have to go onto the Watershed Council's website and look for volunteering for the river roundup. And you have to register ahead of time, and then you'll get instructions.
DBA,
I'll be brief. There was a meeting on August 15th. A setback variance was approved. There was a meeting on September 19th and the land division variance was approved. There's nothing on the agenda for October, so no meeting.
thank you. I do hope you will read my, and personally thank the people that that helped. It was a heavy lift, in more ways than one. And, I want to say a special shout out to, Rob Pattinson,
Oh,
because I mean,
nice job on the fair. So-
nice sign, and it comes apart, and you just did good job all around. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, all right. Public comment.
No report from Better.
Is there anyone in the township hall that would like to comment? All right, online?
Yes, Rob Pattinson.
All right, Rob.
Thank you, Jan. That was very sweet. Now, having said that, spank on all of you except for Kim Moore, because you approved the church without getting the scientific data that you asked for, and you didn't have your own scientist to interpret the data, and their scientist wasn't even here to interpret the data. I think the township needs a consultant who can help with the science in these situations. And thank you, Commissioner Moore, for not voting to send it on to the Board of Trustees, because I will remind you that Crossroads, you did the same thing where you put a bunch of conditions on Crossroads. You asked for testing. Crossroads did some BS testing, and the board approved it anyway just a couple of weeks ago. So this commission should not trust that the Board of Trustees is going to do the right thing You need to do your part before it gets to the Board of Trustees, and tonight you didn't do that. And then the memo from Trenton Singer talked only about the metals. It did not refer in any way to any of the chemical compounds. He was only referring to the metals, the lead, zinc, and so forth. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Move to adjourn.
Support?
Or is there more public? No.
Okay, move to close public comment.
Support?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Am I motioning to
Public
close
comment
public?
is 9:15. All right, and then, is there a second to
Support
adjournment?
the motion to adjourn.
Okay, riser. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then we go ahead and close, adjourn at 9:15.
Can you read my reading?